Hey friends, and welcome back, and today's Fretted Friday is going to be the glarry base repairs. Yes, so welcome back folks, really good to be back on Fretted Friday. I hope this week has treated you well and I hope that you have a great weekend. As promised, we were going to do some of the fixes on the glarry base, and today we're going to take the neck off it. We're going to put this new tuner peg on the A string, and we're going to have a little bit of a go at sorting out the neck break angle with a shim, all coming right up. Yes, so this came in the post this last week while I was working, and I thought we would give it a go at putting this together. It looks very much like this is identical to the existing on this. Certainly the diameter is exactly the same. And so this should fit quite nicely in place of the one which doesn't turn. And here's the example of that. So trying to tune it up, and don't know if you can hear that slipping, but it slips past this. There we go. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So first thing we're going to do is going to get all the strings off this. Okay, so all the strings have got to come off, and they'll just be set aside. We are going to reuse them for now. This will probably get a new set of strings in time, but for the time being, we'll use these to check the setup and make sure that the new neck break angle is good. We'll be doing a temporary neck set as well. We'll test it out and I'll show you the method that we'll use, but it may not be permanent because at the moment I just want to check the shim works, and then we will replace the shim for a more permanent shim, which will be a lot better. So we'll put those to one side. We've got the bridge here, which was right down as low as ever it could be put down, but it's time to get the neck off of this base. You'll see that I have the toolkit out, and I just want to make sure I get the right head screwdriver, and I don't mean between Phillips and flathead, I mean a very good size to fit in the holes here so that we don't cross thread these. Very important whenever you do any of this sort of adjustment on a guitar. And yet, absolutely, I'm just simply doing this on my lap. These screws are not at all tight. There was no danger really here of shearing these. I'm just loosening each of them off in turn first, just so that we know that they're all going to come unstuck. Because if we took out a screw completely and did each of the four in turn, it might put a lot of pressure on the final screw, and that might cause us to cross the head as well. Once again, just going to put these screws to one side and ready for reuse once we put this shim in. This shouldn't be the longest video ever. It should be fairly quick, because this is not actually, as a temporary test, this is not a big job to put a temporary shim in the neck with a bit of cardboard, just to check that we can get the right angle. And it's worth putting the shim in first, if ever you need to do this, where you've got a problem, where you believe that there's a problem with the nut as well. Before you adjust the nut, you should definitely, a little bit of sawdust behind this plate. So that was not making the best of contacts either. They've got a middle point in this, or middle hole I should say, which would usually be used for an adjustment screw, but there's obviously no adjustment screw on this. So it's a standard Chinese style plate with a piece of plastic as well that sits behind the metal back plate to give it, I guess, stop it from marking the back of the guitar quite so much, just to give it something soft. But again, I think that affects the resonance. And then just very gently, instead of it falling forward, just going to ease that neck backwards and out of that neck pocket. Lots of sawdust coming out with it. And there we go. That's the neck off this bass. An awful lot of sawdust coming with it. So there we go. That's the body. Get rid of some of that sawdust. We'll have a bit of a clean up later. Actually, while I've got this neck off, I do also realise that I need to just give this a little bit of a sand over with some sort of 1000 or 2000 grit sandpaper, just to take some of these little unfinished sandings off. But we'll get on and do the tuning peg. So the body can go up there behind me, and we will take out this tuning peg. And this is where I need to go into my smaller toolkit and find myself not that one, but a much smaller Phillips head screwdriver, which I know is in here. It's in here somewhere. There, not that one. There's an even smaller one than that. Let's take out some of my kit. There we go. See if we can find this. There it is. That's the one I'm after. So this small screwdriver will fit into these holes very nicely. And again, we'll just loosen them all. And I may even just reuse these screws rather than the screws that came with the new tuning peg. Just loosen them all off a little touch. That's it. Nice and straightforward. And then we can take them out. And again, normally I have a little dish that I put these in. But for today, oh actually look, we'll use my my nut sauce, aka Vaseline. We use the tin lid of that so that we don't lose these screws. And I think this new unit is just going to simply slot in place of the old. And I'm hoping that I won't even need to replace the ferrule at the front, because this should just drop out like so, and then we'll chuck that on the floor so that we don't get it mixed up with this new one. And the new one, I'm hoping, yeah, look at that, even the holes line up. Just drop this new one in. So I have replaced like for like, and hopefully now this tuner issue will be resolved. Very, very nice, easy fix. That's what we like, folks. And there we go. That's that replaced. Nice and simple little job. And they're all fairly free-flowing now. And that should give us a working tuner on that. So next we will go and just put a nice gentle sand on this neck. See you there. So there we go. I have rubbed the neck back, sanded the neck, and got it absolutely perfect. and it feels really beautiful. I've also wire-walled the fretboard and the frets and given them a bit of a polish as well, so that looks a lot more shiny now, as you can see, and very pleased with how that is. So the next job is to have a little look at this neck joint and see if we can shim it. So we've replaced this, we've sorted the neck out. We should, I suppose, before we get that far, just take this pick guard off and have a little look at the electronics and see what they look like. So let's do that. Okay, let's have a see what we've got. Okay, so the pickups are, oh crikey, there's loads and loads of mess underneath this pick guard, and the pickups are body mounted. There we go, if you can see that. And to me, it looks very much, oh, there is a connection in red to the ground, which does go through to the bridge, but it is not exactly a sturdy piece of cable. And also you can see these pots are tiny, and looks like a pretty cheap capacitor and pretty cheap, well, what would you expect for the price of this glarry, folks? It's going to be cheap components. And looking at this, they are CFs and CFs. So they're both, as I suspected, logarithmic controls. Now, the issue that I have is I've only got full-size pots, and they are never going to fit into that hole there. So what can we do about the, well, I'll tell you what, let's take this protective film off, because while we've got the screws off, this will make much less mess, although it will still be an issue around the controls. Much less of an issue though than when all the screws are on there. So just get rid of this plastic coating, and what I think we could do is perhaps to just put some foil on the inside of this to try to get, oh goodness, has this got a second plastic cover on it? It does. This has had a double plastic film on it. I thought that felt a bit peculiar. So let's take both of the protective films off. Wow, I've never ever seen that before. Two plastic films covering this pick guard. There we go. Just come round that pot and this up here as well. Get rid of that. Let's come right the way around this pot and get rid of that. I have never ever known a pick guard to have two layers of protective plastic on it. It's very strange indeed. So, not a great deal that we can do other than to put some foil in here, but for the use and for the price of the instrument, I'm not going to fully shield the inside of this. I may just put a little bit of foil around the inside just to give it a little bit of extra protection. And it's actually, if I take those pickups out, there's every chance they won't go back in again. And I think for the amount of shielding it's going to do, I'm not going to bother. I think that it is quite noisy, but there's definitely a connection through to this bridge, we can actually check that. Let me just get the right size screwdriver. Let's pop this bridge off. Okay, so let's just pop this bridge off and see. Aha! Right. Lots and lots of mess on the bottom of this guitar, on the bottom of this bridge, and just cleaning that away, and all we've got is a little tiny loop of copper sitting up through, and what we really want to do is we want to have that soldered to the back of this. Now this is obviously a plated or a galvanized plate, so what we are going to need to do is we're going to need to put a bit of scratching on it so that we can get some solder to take to the underlying metal. So I'm just going to scratch this up. Probably best to do that away from the guitar body, really. Just using a screwdriver. And this will provide us some, actually that looks like, funny enough, that looks like it's brass underneath there. Plated brass, which is quite impressive if it is. It's definitely coming up a much more golden colour. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but now what we can do with this is we can use this key as a key to solder that wire on, and that will resolve our problem big time. So that's what I'm going to go and do. Now we've soldered that to that key on the back of that, and also while I was at it I had a little bit of conductive foil offcuts, so I used them just to give a little bit of a shielding inside there. I didn't bother with the cavities because really it's only from the top that there will be an issue with radio frequency interference, RF interference. Just want to turn those back under so that we don't actually see this shielding material, and we can screw this pickguard and the bridge back on again. And there we have it, that's back on. And I also took out that little bit of solder that was sitting under there. This bridge is nice and tightly screwed down. I've tried to get it as tight as I can, but it will have a little bit of difficulty going down because of the fact that it has now got the good contact, the soldered contact underneath there for the earth, for the ground. So there we go. That's all ready now for the neck to be shimmed. Now, as I said, I'm going to do this as a temporary measure, and I happen to have this Tusk Harmony Rich Picks bit of cardboard, and for me that works as good as a credit card. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it up so that it fits between the bolt down holes for the neck. So like that. And I'm going to tear that little bit off because we're not going to need that. And I'm literally just going to put that piece of shimmed card between the two back holes to lift the back end of the neck up. And I'm going to say that's about 2 mil. We probably could actually pop this in a little bit to beef it up at the back just a touch. And we'll see if this turns out to be enough, and if it does, that's what we will use for the piece of wood that goes in there in terms of the depth and width of that when we want to reset the neck. Okay, it looks very much like that shim may be enough. and it does give me some adjustment on the bridge pieces. So we'll be able to adjust those up. Let's get it strung back up and we'll test it with that little shim in place. I'm just going to give it one last little tighten on the back using the correct screwdriver. That's nice and tight. Okay, so we can see that shim has actually done exactly the right job. That has now meant that this angle of the neck is definitely back far enough for us to need to adjust these saddles. So we'll do that. Okay, now we are. And what we really want to know is, now that we have got the tuning, now that we've got the relief right, in fact that looks like rather a lot of relief, because we broke the cardinal rule, of course, of not having it tuned to pitch, or I broke the cardinal rule, not having it tuned to pitch, when I set that relief, which means that I need to just take a little bit of that relief out. It's very tough on a bass because everything is much more tense and takes a lot more power and exertion to adjust. So I'm going to take a touch of that relief out, see if we can get back to... See, there's a little bit of buzz there. As per usual, fret the first and the last, and you want a little bit of play underneath the string. I think that could probably go back just a little touch more. So let's move the strings out the way again. But it was worth getting the strings back on and getting this shim, this temporary shim, which I think may as well become a permanent shim, listening to the sustain on the guitar hasn't been affected at all. It's a beginner's guitar, and there's an awful lot of work that goes into creating a wooden shim to cover the entirety of that pocket. If this was a higher end instrument, or if this was an instrument that was going out to gig, etc., then I would probably put a wooden shim, create a wooden shim the right size to put that angle on the neck. But to be fair, for a beginner guitar, this is pretty nicely set up now. And in fact, I think this is going to sound really quite nice once it's plugged back in. So let's let Matt come back and try this bass out and see what he thinks now that I've done all of the work. And definitely the neck feels so silky smooth. It really is beautiful now, the feel of the back of this neck. Very, very smooth. Feels played in because I've taken it from 240 grit sanding right the way up, including wire wooling. I've also taken it all the way up to 2400 grit. So it's a very, very smooth finish, but it literally just glides, your hand glides along this bass. And what's more, I think we need to just plug it in, adjust the pickup height, and get Matt back in to play it. So let's do that.